Hello everybody and welcome to another Critical Hit Wargaming speed painting guide. Today we're going to tackle one of the most horrible models in the entire universe to paint, as we all know, and that is an Imperial Fists Space Marine. Now it's common conception that these are really difficult to paint and that yellow is really difficult to paint, but thanks to the new contrast range it's not actually that difficult. So what we're going to do is learn today how to speed paint Imperial Fists in under 30 minutes. First thing you're going to need to do is prime your model with Wraithbone, which is a contrast undercoat. You can use white, but it's going to make the yellow look a little bit more washed out. After that, we're going to switch to Iyanden Yellow contrast. Now, a lot of people hate contrast for some reason, but it is a really good tool, and we're going to use it today to get the first yellow base layer on. So just literally just lather it all over the model. Make sure you cover the entire thing. If you're going to be batch painting, paint the first one, move on to the second one, go around your whole squad, and then go back to the beginning and just check that you haven't missed any areas, because the whole model really does need to be covered to get a good result. Next we're going to switch to Uriel Yellow, and what we're going to be doing here is dry brushing but with a little bit more paint still on your brush. And the reason we're doing this is, if you have a look at the intercessor in the video there, on his left leg and on the panels at the top there, you can see it on his backpack. There's blotchy orange blobs, for lack of better words, where the contrast has pooled slightly. Now, because we're speed painting, we don't want to sit there getting rid of every single one of those blotches, especially when you're painting 10-15 models in one go. So this stage, using Uriel Yellow with slightly more paint on your brush, making sure to angle it away from any of the recesses where the Iyanden Yellow contrast has shaded the recesses. You see I'm just doing down strokes there over the knee pad to avoid getting it in the creases. That's going to cover the entire model in a new yellow layer, which is Uriel Yellow, which is good because if later on you make any mistakes, you're going to be able to just use Uriel Yellow to cover it up. In addition to that, we're going to get a nice solid yellow colour over the model and make it look like we've not actually used contrast paint. Once you're finished with that, we're going to switch to Dawn Yellow. We're going to do a very light edge dry brush of Dawn Yellow. You really need to make sure that as much of this is off of your brush as possible, because if there's too much left on it and you start dry brushing over the top of this yellow, you're going to get this horrible chalky yellow streaks over it, and it's not going to look very good at all. So literally just find a couple of raised areas where the brush will catch nicely, give it a little rub across the top. And that's going to give the illusion that you've spent a little bit of time highlighting, when in actual fact you haven't. You've spent about 30 seconds per model doing it. Next we're going to switch to Khorne Red and start painting in some of those red details. If you're painting the Imperial Fist with the black details, obviously just wait until we get to the black stage and you'd paint all of these bits black, but in this case we're going first company, so we'll be using Khorne Red. If you want a slightly lighter red, you can use Wasdacker Red. However, I wanted to keep it nice and muted, so I've gone for Khorne Red. And there's the shoulder trim and the Aquila on his chest done. Next is going to be Rhinox Hide. I'm going to start painting in some of the leather details. For this, you're going to do his belt and his holster and his little ammo pouches that he's got going on his back. And with that complete, we can now move on, and we're going to be switching to black Templar contrast paint, and this is going to be to colour in any of the black details on the model. It might take a couple of layers because we started with a Wraithbone undercoat, and that's pretty bright even for black Templar to cover. We're going to be doing his bolt rifle and any of the little ribbed creases between his armour plates. Once we're done with all that, we're going to switch to Rakarth Flesh. That's going to be to paint one single piece of this model, and that is the purity seal on his leg. So one decent coat of that. Next is Screamer Pink, and that is another single-use paint. That is just to paint the purity seal on his leg. Next we're switching to Leadbelcher, and that is to paint all of the metallic areas on the model. That's going to be parts of the bolt rifle. That's going to be the round bits on his shoulder pads that you'll see when I get around to them in a second, and the holster of his pistol. With the metallic areas done, things have really started to come together now. So we're going to paint some details, do some shade, and then we're pretty much finished. First, you're going to need Retributor armor, and that is to paint any gold details on your models. On this model in particular, it's just going to be the little insignia on his bolt rifle casing. Next up is Basilicanum Grey, and that is to shade all the metallic areas. If you don't own Basilicanum Grey, you can use Nuln oil. It does pretty much exactly the same job, but Basilicanum Grey has better coverage, comes out a little bit darker. Next up is Agrax Earthshade, and that is to shade in all the other details on the model. So the purity seal, any golds that are on the model, the leather pouches on his back, and we're going to do the reds with it as well. Now when it comes to painting the red trim, I suggest you switch to a detail brush, because we're going to do something quite specific here, and that is to get some Agrax Earthshade on our brush. But then what we're going to do is run our brush over the top of the red trim on his shoulders, but allow a little bit to flow onto the yellow, so it creates a bit of a recessed shade, and that's important to make the colours differentiate from each other. Otherwise you've just got the orange of the Iyanden yellow in between them, and it looks a bit tacky. This really does improve things a lot. Next we're going to switch to White Scar, and that is to paint the eyes. So just neatly paint inside the eye lens there, and then we'll switch to a different colour to shade them in. The colour we're going to use for the eyes is Biel-Tan Green. Now this is a really simple step. You simply load your brush up with some Biel-Tan Green, and then make sure to carefully put it into the eye socket. And then once you've got a decent amount in there, just wipe some off your brush, and then dab your brush right in the middle of the eye, and that'll create that'll let the white show through and give it the appearance that it's glowing. With that done, our intercessor isn't far from being finished. There's just one more detail we've got to do, and that is to use some pink horror to pick out the edge of the purity seal. It might seem a little trivial thing to highlight, but it gives the illusion that you've spent a little bit more time on it than you actually have, and it really is a 2-second job. Now it's time to base the model, and I'm going to be using Astrogranite to create an urban, dusty environment. Now obviously if the rest of your army is based differently to this, then base it according to your own scheme. However, if you haven't got any idea how to base your model, then it's always best with light models such as yellows and whites or other bright colours to have a dark coloured base or a darker base, because that's going to allow your model to stand out on whatever it stood on. So with that Astrogranite layer dry, I'm going to switch to Agrax Earthshade, and that is going to be put all over that Astrogranite to apply a dirty shade. With that dry, I'm going to move on to the next layer, which is Ushabti Bone, and I'm going to dry brush over the top of the Astrogranite. As you can see here, using that dark base really helps the lighter model stand out. I'm going to switch to a Abaddon Black now. I'm going to paint the rim of the base because that's how I like mine to look. You could use grey here if you wanted to, or you could use something like Steel Legion Drab. And here it is in all its finished glory. I've done a couple of layers of Abaddon Black around the base. I've stuck a grass tuft on. I've given it a spray of Munitorum varnish, and it is complete. Hopefully, upon looking at this, you feel slightly more confident to paint some yellow going forward. It's not as bad as you think using that contrast layer to start with. And there's a photo of it taken at the end. I apologise to anyone watching. I haven't actually got any Imperial Fist transfers to stick on the model, so he looks a bit plain there. But that is the whole thing done. Now, as always, how long did it take me to paint this model? Well, it actually took me 29 minutes and 45 seconds. It might take a little bit longer for some models that have more detail. It might take a little bit less time for others. But you're looking at about 30 minutes, probably a little bit slower for the first few you do, which isn't bad to paint a yellow model. To paint it a traditional way, like using white, and then going Avalon Sunset and then highlighting it up, that's going to take a really long time. But this is a pretty good speed painting method, and it's going to get you some good results and make it look like, as always, you've spent more time on it than you actually have, which is the aim of these speed painting guides. If that's helped you at all, please do like and subscribe. The channel's been growing a little bit over the last couple of weeks. People have liked the skeleton video I did. If you've got any suggestions, chuck them below and I'll do them for you. Thanks very much.